Ubisoft released a new trailer on their page yesterday, announcing the open beta for Ghost Recon Wildlands. It'll be playable from February 23rd through February 27th. For this announcement, it seemed like a good time to talk about my impressions from the closed beta and technical test in which I participated earlier this month, and why I'm not excited about Wildlands. One of the biggest problems I noticed in the beta is that the game world is just kind of empty. Ubisoft boasts about this being the largest game world they've ever created, but, what good is a huge canvas if there's nothing on it? This is one of the biggest problems with open world games, and it's hardly exclusive to Ubisoft, but it's basically just a marketing gimmick. A lot of developers seem to think that making a giant map is a selling point, but what I've noticed is that many of them don't effectively utilize the space they've created. Ubisoft, as one of the largest publishers in the modern gaming industry, is one of the worst offenders of making a large map just for the sake of having it. If you look at Watch Dogs, The Crew, The Division, to some extent Far Cry 4, and now Ghost Recon Wildlands, you see the same issue over and over. Huge game world, often based on real-world cities or locales, and every single one of them feels sparse and dead. In Wildlands, it seems that there are story missions, side missions in the form of assisting the rebels who are fighting the drug cartel, and collectibles. Collectibles take the form of skill points, resources, which are also used to upgrade skills, weapons, and weapon parts. And that's it. That's all there is. There are the occasional convoys that show up that you can attack for additional resources, but the only one present in the closed beta spent most of its time driving outside of the area you could actually play in, so you couldn't really attack it very effectively unless you got really lucky. There's nothing dynamic about discovering things. The game highlights cartel lieutenants on the game map, whom you can interrogate for information on rebel mission locations and skill points, and the game doesn't reward exploration beyond that. There's nothing to see. Contrast this to, say, Los Santos in Grand Theft Auto 5, which has plenty of political commentary, little secrets and Easter eggs, references to the real world and other entertainment both in Rockstar's universe and in the real world, and parodies, and an insanely good eye for the tiniest little details. Or Skyrim, Cyrodiil and Morrowind in the Elder Scrolls games, or Washington DC, Las Vegas and Boston in the Fallout series, which encourage and often reward the player for putting away their map, picking a direction, and just walking out into the middle of nowhere. Instead, Ghost Recon Wildlands essentially holds your hand and says, hey, here's what you can do if you go here. And then it throws an icon up on your minimap, and that just kills it. I have no investment in the game world. I have no interest in exploring or discovering anything because I'm simply trying to find the quickest way to get to one of the objective or icon markers. There's absolutely nothing left for me to discover organically. And speaking of the quickest way to get to an objective, Ubisoft, we need to have a serious talk about vehicles. The driving controls in The Crew were pretty bad, and the vehicles felt like they belonged in an arcade racer, but the controls could at least be changed to feel a little tighter, more responsive, and more realistic. The driving in Wildlands, on the other hand, takes what didn't work in The Crew and multiplies it by a factor of 10. Now, it, to me, seems baffling to double down on terrible driving mechanics. But you did it. Vehicles feel utterly weightless. There are basically no physics to them. It's like big rigs over the road racing all over again. You can't even flip your own vehicle over because the tires are magnetically attached to the ground. You can drive an Isuzu truck up an almost vertical incline, which is a great advert for the company, if it were real. Yet for some reason, I can't take a gentle corner at 25 miles an hour in a 4,000-pound Jeep without spinning out of control and fishtailing into a tree or oncoming traffic. These guys are supposed to be the best operatives in the US, and they can't drive a car? Now, I'm not saying Wildlands needs to be a vehicle simulator, but driving and flying are just not enjoyable at the moment, and that's a really big problem because the game world is really, really large. The closed beta was limited to one of the 21 provinces, and it took a good several minutes to fly in a helicopter in a straight line from the bottom of the province to the top of it. So here's the thing, Ubisoft. If navigating around the game world is a chore, then I'm just going to use the fast travel mechanic as much as possible. If I'm going to use the fast travel mechanic as much as possible to get as close to my objective as I can without having to use vehicles, then I'm not going to explore much of the game world. If I'm actively avoiding exploring much of the game world because exploring isn't fun and rewarding, then there's really no point to having an open world game. You might as well just have individual missions taking place in a large mission zone. In other words, exactly what Splinter Cell, Ghost Recon, and Rainbow Six have been doing successfully for the past 2 decades. Another big issue I have with the very core of the game is the supposed artificial intelligence. The AI coding in this game is laughable at best and truly dismal at its worst. Enemies on patrol around an outpost aren't the slightest bit suspicious when they encounter a guard lying on the floor and will opt to just walk right over the body. Now, I'm not an expert in the inner workings of Bolivian drug cartels, but in that situation I don't think the guard's first reaction would be to just walk right past it, as though finding your co-worker with a newly installed peephole in his cranium is just a typical Monday morning. Another time I infiltrated a base controlled not by the Santa Blanca cartel, but by Unidad, which in this game is supposed to be a professional standing army. Rocking a Serbu super shorty shotgun and tossing frag grenades, both of which are extremely loud, I proceeded to march through the base shooting anyone who came to investigate the noise, and for every single kill I was awarded extra experience points for remaining undetected, even though I probably should have had every single hostile in the area converging on my position in short of 6 seconds. Sadly, the terrible AI extends to teammates as well. At one point, whilst prone and scouting a small cartel outpost, I looked over and saw one of my AI teammates trying to crawl into the side of the rock I was lying on for a solid 3 minutes. I gave my team the order to move up to a wall so we could attack the outpost, and rather than spreading out along the wall and using it for cover as any sane individual would do, they clumped up in a tight group next to it. And as soon as a firefight started, they just moved away from the wall that they should have been using as cover in the first place and walked out into the middle of a field and spread out. They didn't even really engage targets until I explicitly gave them the order to open fire. There have been other times where I've given them the order to follow me, and they've taken cover on the same side of the wall that the enemies are on. So rather than my AI teammates putting cover between them and the bullets that are flying at them, they opted to put cover between them and me. And maybe they don't trust me, but that coding just doesn't make any sense. How is it that the AI was infinitely smarter in Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter 2, even though Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter 2 came out 10 years ago? In fact, if I remember correctly, it's just 3 days short of coming out exactly a decade before Wildlands. And civilian AI is just as thick. You and your AI teammates or other civilians are walking across a road, well, the civilian AI just don't give a fuck. They will just plow straight through you like you're the last pizza at the world's least successful weight loss support group. And if you're driving, expect civilians to just stand right in the middle of the road. In a gunfight with cartel forces, civilians will just wander right into the middle of it, because in Ubisoft's eyes, people don't have a sense of self-preservation. The fourth and final issue I have with the core gameplay of Wildlands is the gameplay itself. Since a huge part of the game is spent shooting at things, that part should be fun and competent, right? Well, Ubisoft sort of accomplishes that. Plays like most other first-person shooters when you're aiming down the sights, unless you switch to the third-person view, at which point it pretty much plays like any other third-person shooter, which is good. On the negative side, the cover system is not good. I like how it's contextual, rather than being mapped to a specific key or a button, but the detection system is about as much use as a billboard advertisement for blind drivers on the motorway. When you move up to an object such as a barricade, there's a good chance that you'll take cover in such a way that half of your character is just out in the open, which means you're still taking damage, which means it's not doing its job as cover. And there's no easy way to switch cover, like, for example, if you're taking cover on one side of a doorway and want to switch to the other side. Or if you're taking cover around a corner and want to move around the side of it. And there's no mechanic for blind firing either, which means every time you want to take a shot, you have to pop out from behind cover, and as you can be killed in one shot on the hardest difficulty setting, a blind fire mechanic would certainly be useful. And, just to nitpick, because at this point in the rant, why not, whenever you perform a tactical reload, in other words, when you have cartridges left in the magazine and one round in the chamber, the animation inexplicably shows the ghosts running the action, ejecting a live round, dropping the magazine, seating a new magazine, and then running the action again to chamber a new round, which is just pointless. And there's no way anybody would do that in real life, because you're just wasting ammo. And practically speaking, it means that you can never succeed in having a full magazine plus a loaded chamber, And given that the game starts you off with a non-standard 20-round magazines for weapons that absolutely should have a 30-round magazine like the AR-15 and the MP5, that extra round could really come in helpful. Other animations in this game are equally rough, and it runs the gamut from teammates just appearing out of nowhere and walking, surrendering enemies being pushed around by your vehicle instead of being run over, enemy muzzle flashes that look more like flares than actual muzzle flashes, of which there should be very little because most rifles have flash hiders these days. Running and vaulting animations are shoddy and don't match the objects or the terrain of the world, and bullet behavior is weird. Sniper rifles firing full power rifle rounds have a drop of at least a foot after a couple of 100 meters. Pistol cartridges punch through concrete barricades, and rifle rounds, for some reason, can't go through the holes in a chain link fence. The game is just sloppy. So there you go, those are my top 4 reasons why the closed beta has not left me excited for Wildlands launch. The game world feels sparse and empty, there's not much to do, driving and flying is boring and annoying, the AI is almost hilariously incompetent, and the gameplay itself is just really rough and unpolished. Sorry Ubisoft, but this game is just not ready for a March 7th release. It needs at least another year in development to address 1 or 2 of my points, maybe the lack of stuff to do and the terrible driving and flying mechanics, or another 2 or 3 years to fundamentally rebuild the game into something tight, polished, and above all else, more enjoyable. Have you played Wildlands during one of the beta periods? Have you watched gameplay videos? Do you think this game will be one that gets better as the developers patch it? Or do you think this will be another Ubi flop? Let me know what you think in the comments section below. And if you enjoyed the video, please consider dropping a like and subscribing to my channel, it really helps me out. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. I'd like to take a moment to appreciate the amazing voice acting in this game.
Hey you! Over there! Hey!
I refuse to budge an inch if you do not tell me what is going on.
Sophie! I've just come face to face with a damn bear.